Okay, welcome to my service of my Suzuki 6 horsepower 6DF Alpha. I'm just walking through it now to see what it looks like. Yeah, the name serial plate didn't work. Just point to note then before we start. Always make sure you've got your emergency toolkit to hand there and that it's all in order and all bits are serviceable before we carry out the service. Just good practice. In that emergency kit then you want the spare pull cord rope, the screwdriver with the Phillips and flathead, the two sort of bolts, sort of grippers there, so that's the one's a 10 and one's a 12mm, an 8mm Allen key, some pliers, a spare spark plug and a pin for the propeller, and then an internal pin for the shear pin for the propeller in case you have a propeller strike and you need to replace any of the bent pins. And that's the emergency kit there really. This video then, it's not obviously, I'm not a professional, but this is how I've serviced my outboards and it's worked for me. So I may do some things wrong, I may not. But it's just a sort of amateur video for anyone that's struggling to service their outboards themselves, just to help them out a bit. I have got a manual included in the description that goes into more detail with all the correct parts named and things like that. So yeah, enjoy the video and let's begin. And here we have the servicing kit for the Suzuki 6DF Alpha. We've got the 4-stroke oil, the impeller, oil, fuel filter, spare seals when we replace the screws and the seals later on, gear oil, the nozzles put it in with, oil filter, spark plug and some rubber gloves. Okay, we're going to start off with doing the gear oil, and I've used the toolkit that came with the engine that I used for the emergency stuff in the blue bag as you saw pictured earlier. And we will be undoing this screw here to put the oil in when it's empty, and obviously, and then just to give it a bit of release as well, help it flow quicker. And then this is where the bottom here, where the screw, where we undo to get the actual wheel out, and this is where we're replacing the seals as well, and that's located there. Right, so some of those screws, or both those screws, were quite tough to get out, so I had to use a bigger screwdriver. And tip, if you've got a screwdriver hole in like that, you can get a bit more torque in that screwdriver by just placing a bar in like so. And if they're in good, make sure you've got a nice tight seal in there in the screw, and then you can use that bar you've just put in there as like an extra sort of handle to give you a bit more torque or power into that screw so you can get it undone. I had a bit of problem there, so I had to use it to get it undone because it has been undone for a while. I think it was September last time I did it. But yeah, that's the screw out now. As you can see, the oil isn't cut, it's just slowly dribbling out. Okay, if I now undo this one here, just get more pressure out, it starts to come out very quick now because I've just released that, and it's just letting the air flow get into it. And what I'll do is I'll just put that screw to one side just so I know that's the one that goes in there. It doesn't really matter, but I just like to keep it the same. And there we go, the gear oil is now emptying. When you're checking the gear oil, it's just a good idea now just to see whether water's got in there. As you can see, this one hasn't, because it's still remained quite clear. If we did, however, have water ingress into the sort of assembly in there, it would be like a clear milky white colour. If it's a clear milky white colour, that usually means you've got like a seal gone inside here, or in the internals later on in this sort of end where the water pump is, one of the seals might have gone, where the water pump housing is, just underneath it. Okay, and that can be a job in itself to do, but we don't have any milky gear oil or gear lube, so we're all good here. So we're just going to do the gear lube change once it's empty. So now that the gear oil is mostly out, what you're going to do is just set up your gear lube ready to put in. What I like to do is just squirt a bit in, and then just let any sort of dregs run out there, because you've got enough to fill up. And it just sort of clears it out. Okay, so once you've flushed it through with a bit of the fresh oil gear lube, just replace the screw. I've just hand tightened it on. Pretty sure there's probably going to be some torque sort of spec to tighten it, but I just hand tighten it, and I did it last time, and as you can see, no water ingress, so all good. Okay, and we're just going to fill it up. Okay, what you'll do is just fill it up until you see the oil just start to come out the top. I'm not going to play this the whole way through, but what will happen then is as you fill this up, the inside will fill up with the gear lube, cover all the gear, the gear assembly, and yeah, keep that nice and lubed up. Obviously, if you did find any metal filings in there, then again you'd need to open up obviously the gear housing and have an inspection there, maybe replace some parts if they're too damaged. Okay, so that's the gear lube done. Now we can do the cathode anodes. I can never remember which way they are, what they're called, but what you want to do is just give them a clean. You can do this every time you just get it out and clear the lines through with water. You can just give these a quick scrub. I like to just do this during the service, and then every now and periodically just scratch them up, make sure they're all clean. You can buy new ones, so these will degrade after time, and it just gets to the point where you just need to just change them. But these are good at the moment, so just going to obviously give it a scratch and just get all the sort of build up off there off. A lot easier when you're not filming. Right, so that's the anode cathode done. It's time for the oil. Okay, this one's an 8mm Allen key, and to undo the oil then it's just one bolt under here, and we'll get that undone and we'll empty the oil. I'm just going to put the oil in the same pot with the gear lube, and then what I'll do is I've got a sealed container where once I finish all my oils and that, then I'll take to skip or local council. Just check your rules, because some of them may accept or may not. You just have to check your sort of local council rules, but mine will accept if it's in a sealed container. Just come undone. Big old long one, there we go. Just like you do with the cars. Let that empty. Also, just inspect it as well. So that came out quite dark. So yeah, that was in need of a change. Also, other things you can look for are sort of iron filings, or just not iron filings, just metal shavings in there. If you've got some metal shavings, that's a clear sign of something going wrong with the internals there, with the cylinders and all that. So it'd be, if you get that, it's a good idea to get that checked out. Okay, so that's the oil out now. I'm going to do the oil filter. So these were just done up. This is where it's housed, sorry, and they were done up with the 10mm bolts. So just get yourself a 10mm spanner. I like to use the ring ends to get them off. And once that's off, if there's a bit of a tight seal, just carefully get a flat head in here and just carefully prise it open, and then it'll come off, and then we can change the oil filter. As you can see, it's got a lot of oil in there, so I've got to be careful taking that out. So to get the oil filter out, I actually used a seal puller, because it was a bit of a nightmare to get out. So I just used the seal puller, got inside there. You can quite clearly see there that this filter needed changing. Look at all that gunk in there. Okay, right, we'll put that down in there. So it's now time to flush the remaining oil. One point to note, which I mentioned before, is make sure you run the engine and you warm it up, and then you make sure it's cool enough to touch before you then empty the oil. Because if you do cold oil change, the oil is still thick and it doesn't come out as good. So once we've undone the bolts and we've emptied the oil, we took the air filter out as shown before. Sorry, not air filter, oil filter. We then flush through with some excess oil until it runs clear, and then we do the bolts up and we fill up with 0.7 litres of oil for the DF6A. There you go, just flushing through there. Put a sock in the way just to stop any excess getting in down by the side of the engine. Ideally you'd want a funnel for this, but I don't have one. And there you go. It's leaking through there now and it's coming through nice and clear. So I'm now gonna fill it up once I've done the bolts up. Before we do the bolts up, just remember just to change the gasket there, get a new one, and that prevent any leaks in the future. It's just like changing an oil on a car or doing a service on a car if you've ever done one before. Okay, that's the bolt back on, and I just do it hand tight again. I'm pretty sure there's probably some torque settings for it, but I just do it hand tight and it's done. Okay, and that's the oil filter in. Don't do what I do the first time and put it the wrong way. Make sure you beat the oil filter, because it does say point towards engine on the bottom end, because you've got the rubber seal at the bottom. I did put oil in beforehand and I did fill up the oil filter with a bit of oil in the end, and I'm just going to just top it up off a bit there, because what I don't want it to do is just suck air into the actual engine, around the engine. Okay, so I'm just going to, it's just like what you do with normal cars. So there you go, back on. I've done it hand tight again. One point to note, when you've put all this stuff back together, just make sure you give the whole area a good clean and you get the oil off the pipes and things, because some pipes, I don't know whether these ones do or not, but some pipes perish when you motor oil get onto them and that. So just make sure you give them a good wipe off, and if needs be, a bit of soapy water and detergent, get it all off. Okay, so that's the bolt done up. That's the oil filter put back in with some oil just to suck up when it turns on. We've hand tightened those bolts, and now it's time to put 0.7 litres of 4-stroke engine oil into here. Okay, what we're going to do is just going to fill it up. I'm going to probably put in about 500, then check with a dipstick to see if we've got enough, and then just keep topping up until I get in between the max and min line on the dipstick. Okay, I've included the manual for the service manual for this engine in the description, or at least a link to it, so there's a complete guide there if you don't understand what I'm saying. You see, I've probably only put 1, 2, 3, I've probably put 400 mils in there, and it's supposed to take 0.7, and I don't know if you can see that, but that's like pretty much on the upper limit there, so I'm going to stop there. So that's the oil change now done with the complete with filter. Now it's time for the oil fuel filter. So as you can see, this is looking a bit yellowish, so it's looking like it needs a change. So what we're going to do is just ensure the cut-off switch is on, which it is, and we're just going to use some pliers just to pinch open these sort of pinch bits here for the pipes, and take the filter off.
And that is the fuel filter changed. Putting it back the same way, and there you go, nice and new.
Right, so now I've done a lot of changes on this engine now. I've just not done the spark plug yet, which I'll do in a second. I'm just going to do a quick oil check again, because obviously it's had a lot of moving around, so it's had time to shift. So I'm just going to dick it in like that, and let's see. Okay, so that's on the lower end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more oil now. So here's my favourite bit, the impeller change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cover off. Probably use a screwdriver to do that gently. Oh, engine nearly dropped then. Yep, I'll get it in there, get the cover off, make sure the engine's in gear, because you'll see in a minute the linkage is easier to access that way. Okay, yep, so there's a cover off. This one, just one of those little swivelly bits. In my experience with servicing outboards is when you change any bolts, I know this is random, but when you get these sort of bolts and your engine's quite old, it's not too much of a problem with this one when it's 2019, but I've had a lot of outboards from the 80s. Always buy spare bolts, a tap-in set, because guarantee one of those is going to snap off at some point. But yeah, there's the linkage. Okay, I'm just going to move the gears now just to show what I mean by getting it easy to access. So that one's in forward, neutral and reverse. We're going to keep it in neutral for this. Some of them it's easier to put it in forward, but you'll have to just test that. If it's this outboard, it'll probably be this, but if it's a different one, then yeah, it'll probably be just play around with the gears and see which one's easiest to access. So once you've loosened up the gear linkage enough, you then want to start on these ones here to pull the lower end off. So for these lower end bolts, they was a 12mm. So far I've been using an 8, sorry, cancel that, a 10 for the other bolts, but these ones are 12. So that's the bolts out. If you find hasn't come off for a while and you need to give it a gentle bit of persuasion, use a rubber hammer and just give it a couple of taps until it comes free. And you see it starts to come free now. Okay, I'll finish the rest off camera. So as I'm sliding the lower unit out, you'll see this pole here comes out of the sort of linkage disassembly there. Just make sure you take note of that and try not to undo this bolt too much, or you'll have problems getting it all back in later on. Okay, next is taking the water pump housing off. Again, that's going to be 10mm. This spline here might be dirty. I gave mine a rub down. You can see it's a bit dirty there. All I'm going to do is just put some wheel bearing grease on it, or you can use some marine grade grease, but I'm just going to use wheel bearing grease. Just give that a bit of a grease up, just so it slots in back in nicely later on. Okay, there's the gear linkage arm there. Okay, so as I'm unbolting the water pump, you notice I'm doing it in a sort of cross sort of way. Stick to that way so it tightens evenly when you obviously do it all back up and when you take it off. What some people like to do is change the gaskets as well, but this is quite new, so I'm not going to change the gaskets this time around. But if you have got quite an old outboard, bearing in mind those gaskets are probably going to need changing, which I'll show you later on. Okay, so I've got the bolts off now. All it does is just slides off now. It just slides all the way off the spline and the gear linkage arm. So as you're pulling it off, you'll notice there's a small little pin in there. Just gently lift it up. In this case, this pin just sort of sits in there. Usually, or sorry, on other outboard models, it just falls off. You've just got to be very careful you don't lose that. Okay, but this one just sort of just slots in and comes out. And that's just to hold the impeller in place. There you go, it's out now. So as you can see, here's the sort of metal gasket, and what's happened here then is I've not undone that bolt there, and the whole gasket underneath here has ripped off, so I'm going to have to replace that now, because if I don't, could risk that water leaking out of there when we put it all back together. So yeah, usually on the outboards this is just a separate gasket, but on here it's not. I didn't know that. Now I do. And now I've got to replace it. When I was talking about earlier about if you get milky water in your gear lube, it could be because one of these seals here have gone. There's two that usually sit on top of each other. These ones are okay. They haven't failed yet, so they're going to be staying in. And then the other sort of gasket is down by the prop. Okay, and it's like a larger version of that sort of. And it's just in there. But they don't need replacing. Okay, and this is where you're going to change the impeller once you've slid it off. Okay, so I'm just going to replace that now, and I'll show you what it looks like. So there's the old impeller, there's the new one. Not really much wrong with that, but we'll change it anyway. Keep it as a spare if I don't buy another pack in between this now and next year. New one in, just make sure you get those little grooves on show this end, so when we put it back on the spline, and that little piece of metal or the pin that was exposed earlier can groove in there and enable the impeller to spin rounds for the water pump housing to work and get that tail working and keep that engine cool. So that's that gasket replaced now, and the bolts put on in cross sort of order, so that, there and there. It doesn't matter what order, as long as you just do it in that sort of pattern, just so it tightens up evenly. Point to note, on these plastic water housings, if you tighten up these bolts too tight, or the water pump housing is too perished and old, they will crack, and then you'll have water escaping out of here, and then your tail will not be strong and your engine will overheat. And that gasket that I replaced through here, you'll also get water seepage through there. Okay, so you just got to be careful when doing that water pump housing up, because they're not cheap. So when we put the lower end back in, you've got the spline here. You just need to marry it up with the sort of drive, the spline drive shaft up with the sort of hole up there. If you can see that hole, yeah, you just need to line that up with it, get it in there, and then you've got your gear linkage at the bottom for that arm. And you just got to keep it nice and straight. But what we do is we start off with getting the drive shaft spline all connected back up. Okay, and there's the gear linkage arm. I've got it lined up. I'm just going to push it in place now. Just need to straighten it up. I might need to undo that a bit to get it a better purchase in there. So here's my screwdriver. There we go, loosened it up a bit, and it's going in again. We've got to this bit where you've put the gear linkage back on, and you're finding it's not going in forward, reverse or neutral. What may have happened then is you've not done this up tight enough when you've played around with it, so you might knock it out of gear. So if you get any problems with it, and let's say it's not going into reverse, it's because you've done it, you've knocked it out, and then you've done it up, and then you can only put it into reverse or forward or whatever it is you've done. So what you want to do is just loosen this up, push it down, and it'll go into neutral. You'll know it's in neutral because this will be free spinning. When it's in gear, it goes stiff, and if you turn it, you can hear the cylinders turn, which I'm not going to do because I don't want. Again, if you're struggling to get that lower end on, maybe some little persuasion taps, only tiny ones, persuasion taps might help get it on. If it's still struggling, just take the whole thing off, start again, make sure you've got the gears in neutral, which we did for this one. As you can see, I've got mine in neutral there. and it's all on. I've just got to bolt it up now. So that's the lower end now. What we're going to do is we're going to move on to the spark plug, which is located at the back and here. So we can pull the cover off. There we go. So there you go, 16mm socket. We'll get that spark plug out, no problem. Okay. Let's have a look here. So yeah, spark plug's out. Yeah, it's looking a bit grimy. So we can either clean that up and put that back in, because it's not actually that bad, or we'll get a new one. And that's what I'm going to do, put a new one in. So there we go. Got it started. We're pumping water. You look through this window here. You're looking for the oil splashing about in there. As you can. Good. So yeah, service complete. What we do now then is we're just wait for the water to go warm, which it is starting to already. Good signs. Service complete.